it's hot out, so I cleaned the bathroom this morning. I almost threw up 3 times. Not getting into it, but with the kid and cats, yeah, there's 3 bags of garbage that went out today, and other stuff that wasn't bagged. I just went, fuck this, and took it out to the garbage. So the bathroom is now presentable. And then, I just got back from the store. My supper consists of loaf cake. It's raspberry. Raspberry makes it a fruit. There's at least 10 or 12 servings of fruit, I would think, considering the weight of it is 390 grams. So it's got to be, it's almost a pound. So that's a pound of fruit. No, I don't care what else is in it. Shut up. Mandy retweeted my video that I tweeted to her from this morning. So, outside of her accepting a marriage proposal, I can't think of a way to start my holidays that would be cooler, but she won't accept that for the reasons I outlined in another video about celebrities and the whole I'm not exactly whatever. This is a strange universe that I have been brought into, that I brought myself into, which is why I have one of my strange cat shirts on today, which is like a Japanese anime cat being Godzilla, running amok in what I can assume is Tokyo. Sure, we'll call it Tokyo. It's just nondescript buildings. Wow. I needed to get that out. Got all of my hockey magazines out here because they're normally in the bathroom, reading material. But I took everything out of the bathroom, so any furnishings of any sort in there are gone. This is in part because cats and kid mean hiding places, and I don't want there to be any. Oh, Link, have you got a hairball? Seriously? And you're looking for a place to puke it? Out here in the living room? You little shit. Anyways, let's get into NHL talk. I thought of something today, and it's something that's bothered me. And it bothers me every off-season. You're going to hear it. They're going to make goalie equipment smaller. They're talking about making the nets bigger. More goals. More goals equal more excitement. No. When I got the NHL network, and I'm pretty sure they have that in Canada and the States, and I don't know if TSN has a partnership with them or what it is. Well, TSN does like a pop-up video thing with classic NHL games. So they play them, and then during the game they'll have little pop-ups of where these guys are and who they are and yada, yada, yada. And I watched them, and I was like, yes, this is old Canucks and old Oilers and old Flames and Flyers, and it's all 1983 and 84, and this is great. And I watched games where Gretzky got 4 or 5, 6 points. And I thought about it. I looked at every goal, and I'm like, that wouldn't go in now. That wouldn't go in now. That wouldn't go in. Like, it was endless. The goalies just stood there. There was no butterfly until Patrick Roy came in 1985-86. He brought in the butterfly. When he brought in the butterfly, it became cool to be a goalie. Up until then, the short, fat kid played net. I know. I wasn't the fat kid, but I was the short kid, and I sometimes got thrown in the net. And I didn't want to be in the net, so I had to find somebody shorter to throw in the net. That was a road hockey rule. All the tall, athletic kids wanted to be forwards and defensemen, and the short, fat kid gets to play in net. And it was said by Carter Hart at the draft. They said something to him about goalies and athleticism and being big, and he said, well, gone are the days when you put the short, fat guy in net, or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. And everybody kind of laughed on the panel, but it's true. If you look at games from the 80s, and I'm sure you can YouTube, games from 1984, 85, whatever, look at the goalie. Don't even look at the game. Don't pay any attention to the game. I'm starting with goaltenders. I'm going to get to the rest of the game, though. This isn't just about goalies. The goalies were all stand-ups. They were all about 6 inches shorter than the goalies we have now. Yes, they had smaller pads. They didn't have those giant friggin' stormtrooper-style chest protectors. But there was a lot of goals that went through them. They went under the arm. They went between the legs. They went around the legs. Patrick Roy came in. He started butterflying kids in Quebec. watched him with Montreal, of course, that's their home team, and goalies in Quebec started emulating him. They started emulating the butterfly style. So when the early 90s rolled around and goalies were getting drafted, suddenly they were all Quebec goalies, and they were all butterfly goalies. And they started putting up save percentages that were miles better than other goalies. Then Dominic Hasek started revolutionizing goaltending after that, where it wasn't just a butterfly, it was a shapeless butterfly, and his leg would kick up, and every now and then an arm would kick up, and it would go off his shoulder. The way he played net, the way he played hockey, was fantastic. And you'd watch a game and go, wait, how did he save that? Did he save that with his face? Let's go back. Did he actually lift his head up so it would go right off his mask and ping over the net? Did he do that on purpose? He was insane. You have to be a little bit crazy to be a goaltender. And then after Hasek, we get the goalies we have now. They butterfly, and they never give up on the play. You can see when you look back in the 80s where a goaltender gets deked around and they go, before the puck's even in the net. You can see him going, well, screwed now. They won't dive. They won't look like an idiot. But I remember Dominic Hasek with the Hawks in a playoff game against Pittsburgh, and him rushing out to meet Mario Lemieux on a breakaway halfway to the net. And he dove and knocked it off his stick, and everybody's like, what just happened here? And I remember watching that, and even though the Hawks lost that game and they got killed in the series, that play stood out to me, and I was like, that Hasek kid's got something special going on there. And he's buried behind Belfour. It was Belfour and Waite. I don't remember if Pang was already gone at that point. I think he was. I think he came in to replace Panger. But, Jimmy Waite was at him. Jimmy Waite wasn't a bad goalie either. But Hasek revolutionized goaltending. And between Hasek and Roy, they made it cool to be a goaltender. So now what we have is we have a generation that's grown up where it's cool to be a goaltender. Goaltenders make big money. And that's the thing, too. It used to be just the forwards made all the big money, and the defensemen that could score points made all the big money. Your Paul Coffeys and Ray Borks. And everybody else kind of made entry-level money. Your goaltenders didn't become big money players until Patrick Roy. And then it was, without Patrick Roy, Montreal probably doesn't win the Cup in 86 or 93. So it revolutionized the game there. So there, we have goaltenders are completely different now than in the 80s when there was more goal scoring. Systems. There wasn't one. You watch any game from the 80s and you'll see that there's no defensive system. It's just kind of random. It's no different than if you play a game of floor hockey. There's no system. That didn't change until Jacques Lemaire with the Devils. But Jacques Lemaire with the Devils brought that in from Montreal. Going back to Montreal again. The Montreal Canadiens were always one of the best teams in the league when it came to goals against average. And what I noticed as a kid was, no matter who was leading the league, that goals against average, if you had a really good one, you had a better shot in the playoffs. And I couldn't figure that out. I'm like, well, shouldn't the other team be able to score anyways? I mean, if they're a really good offensive team, can't they break a good defense? And the answer is no. So when Jacques Lemaire got to New Jersey, the Trap was born. In 93-94, the Trap was born. And it almost got past the Rangers. Mark Messier made his, I promise we're going to win, I guarantee a win, bullshit. And they won, so it's not bullshit. And then from there, 95, the Devils weren't deterred. They still had the Trap. The Trap is really boring hockey. And it made Martin Brodeur look better than he was. His goals against average was sensational, and his save percentage was amazing compared to the other goalies at the time, because he only faced 18 or 20 shots a game. And they were never from a prime position in front of the net. They were usually from the point. So you could count on one hand how many hard saves Martin Brodeur had to make any game. He's the only goalie I ever saw who could get shutouts and not be one of the 3 stars of the game. But the Devils weren't an offensive team either. So while Montreal could play a defensive system, and they still had guys like not Patrick Roy, obviously, they had guys like Lafleur, Schutt, Robinson, Savard. Later on, you had Napier, you had Muller. I mean, you had guys who could score goals. The Devils didn't really have that. The Devils were really kind of just an average bunch. So they didn't score or shoot a lot either. So games would end with 20 to 20 shot totals, and they were really, really boring to watch. And when they won the Stanley Cup in 1995, the trap became the in thing. It's like 2007 when the Ducks won the Cup with all of their fighting and truculence, as Bert calls it. All of a sudden, everybody had to get tougher and bigger. Tough and big now, that's what wins in the NHL. And GMs on the weekend thought that again, apparently, and they haven't got the memo that short, skilled players like Patrick Kane or Johnny Gaudreau actually play pretty well in hockey, but whatever, I digress. My point is between 80s and now, so we'll continue on with that. So defensive systems came in from there. So you have the trap, and that's why two-line passes are allowed. Two-line passes were never allowed at that point. And that's part of how the trap worked, because you could just line them up at the red line. So if somebody got around you at the red line, that's fine. That's a two-line pass. That's coming back. That's an offside pass. The red line got pulled out to break the trap. So what happened then was, and I think it was Calgary did the left wing lock first, where they would line guys up and then their winger would go in and sweep for the puck. So they'd go back, but they'd have one guy challenging offensively. Where it's got to now, there's no team I look at and say, those guys play the trap. Minnesota's close. Vancouver, when Tortorella was here, was close. And it's the teams that get a lot of shot blocks. It's the teams that pride themselves on not letting shots get through. And yet, they're not really very good teams either. They're just middle of the road or miss the playoffs. That's as close as you're going to get to playing the trap. It's more of a hybrid game now. And it's more of a taking a chance. And there is because the red line's out, you can make that two-line pass and get around the trap. So if a team just tries to play a trap and protect a one-goal lead, they're probably going to lose that lead. Because over a period of 10, 15 minutes of hockey, somebody's going to pass that puck around and it's going to go in and it's in the net. The other difference between the 80s and now, so between games that had an average of 7.5 to 8 goals a game, and now where it's 5 to 5.5, players are in shape all year. There was a funny story Don Cherry told once, where he said that he met Rick Middleton while he was coaching the Bruins, and in an elevator, and Middleton had packed on a lot of weight. And this was just before training camp, and he said, Rick, it looks like you packed on about 20, 30 pounds there. And Middleton just shrugs and goes, yeah, it was a good summer. That is unforgivable in today's NHL. Kyle Wellwood got a lot of flack because he would get out of shape. Kyle Wellwood wasn't lazy. He was a throwback. He was a throwback to 80s hockey. These guys weren't in the shape that guys are now. These guys are cut out of granite all year round. There's no break. You might take a week off after winning the Stanley Cup, but then you get right back to it because you don't want to be behind the next guy. The NHL is more competitive than ever when it comes to positions in the lineup. And if you take the summer and you just slack off and you just hang out in the woods and have weenie roasts and hang out with your kids, you're done when September rolls around. You're out of shape, and all these kids that are coming into camp are cut out of granite and they're ready to knock you out of the lineup. Because your job should be their job if you're not keeping up. That's how guys are playing so late. That's how Jaromir Jagr can play into his mid-40s, because players work so much harder now. So where they used to retire at 35 because they were just done, they're in shape all year round now. And I think it's easier to stay in shape than it is to have those summers off and then go back. Summers off and then go back. And I'd imagine that the summer off and then you try to go back and you're like, man, I'm just done. Whereas if you're always at it and you're always in shape. So think about it. Goalies are more athletic. They're 8 inches taller than they used to be. Okay, goalies used to be 5'6", 5'7", now they're 6'3", 6'4". There's systems of defense which there didn't used to be. Players are in shape 12 months a year. You have to factor in that back in the 80s, most of the league was Canadian. The Russians hadn't come over yet. The Russians added brand new levels of passing and finesse to the game and styles, and added to the whole idea of having systems. I remember the Soviets coming over here in the 80s, and they were wonderful to watch. It was a beauty to behold their passing, and they just, There seemed to be like this sixth sense about where Larionov would know where Khrushchev was going to be, Khrushchev would know Makarov, and on the point you'd have Fedosov and Kasatonov, and these guys were just on point, and you just watch them, and it was magic to watch them with a puck. So when these guys came over, they brought that with them. The European influence on the game, yeah, it's taken some of the fighting out. You won't see as much fighting in the game now as you saw in the 80s. But the players are bigger, they're more talented, there's more depth than there was in the 80s because you've got more Europeans, you've got more Russians, and Americans. You look at that draft on the weekend, dominated by Americans. They even said on Sportsnet, you have Canada, which has 30 million people. You have the States, which has 300 million people. If hockey starts to get a grip in the States, they have 10 times more people to pull from. And with the underage programs they've come up with now to counteract the CHL, the U.S. programs are actually pretty damn good, and they're turning out some really good players. The U.S. college system is turning out some really good players. These things didn't happen in the 80s. There was no underage program in the U.S. There was college players who played well, but not very many. So you add all this up, that's why you have less goals. Because your defensemen are bigger and stronger, your goaltenders are better and stronger and bigger. You've got systems in play for defense that you never had before. Just the number of coaches on the bench dwarfs what it was in the 80s. The 80s, you had a head coach, a couple assistants, and that was it. And you've got your goaltending coach, your strength and conditioning coach. You might have a guy who's in charge of power plays and penalty killing. You've got all of these coaches. You might have a video coach upstairs. You have guys up in the booth upstairs who do all this extra shit that you never saw in the 80s. Video in the 80s. Roger Nielsen started with the video, and he was considered a joke at the time. The Buffalo Sabres were the first team that really embraced video, and they were considered a joke for doing that. All of this adds up to a more competitive, lower scoring game. So I'm not in favor of, hey, let's penalize goalies. Let's make the nets a lot bigger. Because those games in the 80s where the score is 6-5, 7-4, 8-3, they're boring. They're honestly not very exciting games. And when I watch a game from the 80s and then I watch footage from a game now, the speed, the skill, the parity, it's all so much different than it was back then. So it's definitely a case of people my age remembering things better than what they were. Like, I have, I will continue to collect cards from 1982 and back in that generation because this is what I grew up with. But if you put these guys out here, like, okay, before I finish up this video, let's just take a look at the Canucks, and I'm just going to look at their height and weight. Boldarev, 6 foot 190. Richard Brodeur, the goaltender, 5'7", 173. Tony Curry, 5'11", 166. Mark Crawford, 5'11", 181. Kurt Fraser, 6 foot 190. Thomas Gradin, 5'11", 176. Ivan Hlinka, 6'2", 219. Ron Delorme, 6'2", 182. Rick Lance, 6'2", 198. Lars Lindgren, 6'1", 205. Blair McDonald, 5'10", 180. Kevin McCarthy, 5'11", 185. Jerry Minor, 5'8", 178. Lars Moline, 6 foot 165. Gary Lupul, 5'8", 175. Darcy Rota, 5'11", 180. Stan Smeel, 5'8", 190. Harold Snep, 6'3", 195. Tiger Williams, 5'11", 180. And that's it. How many of those guys are under 6 feet? Is that just the Canucks? I don't know. Let's take a look at the North Stars. George Ferguson, 6 foot 190. Tim Young, 6'2", 180. Bobby Smith, 6'4", 210. Gordy Roberts, 5'11", 185. Willie Plett, 6'3", 205. Steve Payne, 6'2", 205. Al McAdams, 6'2", 189. Joe Malash, goaltender, 5'11", 170. Tom McCarthy, 6'2", 202. Brad Maxwell, 6'2", 185. Craig Hartsburg, 6'1", 190. Kurt Giles, 5'8", 180. Dino Ciccarelli, 5'11", 185. Neil Broughton, 5'9", 160. Don Beaupre, goaltender, 5'8", 155. That was after his second year in the NHL. 5'8", 155 pounds. He weighed 10 pounds more than I do. That's why your goal scoring is down. And adding more goals doesn't add more excitement. Doesn't. The game right now, as it is the most exciting it's been. Hey, I want to see 100-point scorers as much as the next guy. I miss 50-goal guys. I miss 60 goals. I miss 70. I remember 86 goals for Brett Hull, and I remember 92 for Wayne Gretzky. It's not coming back. And making the nets bigger, to me, that's cheating. To me, it would be like if, home runs are down in baseball. They're not where they were during the era of the steroids. So what we're going to do is we're going to move all of the outfield fences in 20 feet. There, that'll create more home runs. Now the game's better. No, you're cheating. NFL, you don't see them shortening the field. There's not enough touchdowns. We'll shorten the field by 10 yards. And when they start talking about changing the size of the net, and they start talking, like, I don't mind changing the shape of the net so there's more room behind the net. That I don't mind. That I think's smart. Because play behind the net, you got to encourage that. It's fun to watch. I remember the Gretzky days. I remember him being parked in his office, as it was called. And, Henrik Sedin has his office back there too. And if you can give them more room behind the net, I'm happy. But in general, more goals doesn't equal more excitement. It just doesn't. So when that debate comes up this summer, I'm just giving you something to think about. I highly recommend watching highlights from the 80s. Pay attention to the size of the goaltenders. It's not just the pads. When J.S. Shiger had the pads, and I mean, yeah, they were huge. He was also, I think he was 6'4". Like, yeah, you had the butterfly wings down here so they could catch everything that went in underneath their sleeve. But that's basically been eliminated. They've already cut the pad size down. These goalies are just really big and athletic. Here's Ron Tugnut. How big was Ron Tugnut? Ron Tugnut was 5'11" and 155 pounds. These guys now are 6'4" and 230 pounds. There's no comparison. Andy Moog. Andy Moog's a goaltender from the 80s. 5'8", 170 pounds. Come on. We want more goals. Well, then start putting the fat kid in net again. That's the only way it's going to happen. Put the short, fat kid in net again. Anyways, that's it from me for today. Mandy Leone, if you're watching this, if you watched the other video, this is Bizarro Land for me. But thank you. She is the exotic goddess, and she's called that for a reason. And bring ROH up into Canada, because it's fantastic wrestling. Better yet, bring Women of Honor up here, and I'll solicit as many tickets as I can get. I will make sure that everybody in town buys them, and we all go to Vancouver, and fun, fun, fun. So, all right, thanks for watching.